Some people really piss this guy off. If one day you need justice and justice doesn't work fairly, you are left with two options. Either you accept it and retreat to your corner, or you seek justice yourself. This is the story of a man who sought justice on his own.
Hello, my name is Marvin Heemeyer, and this tape is about my wife.
Marvin John Heemeyer was born on a farm in South Dakota in 1951. He spent his youth in the U.S. Air Force. He later left and settled in Colorado. He developed his skills in welding and automotive exhaust systems. In the 1990s, he ran several exhaust shops in Colorado. Probably wanting a quieter life, he sold his shops here and settled in a small mountainous area called Granby. He enjoyed spending time in nature anyway. In short, Marvin had found the peaceful life he was looking for, or so he thought. Marvin Heemeyer was a man who loved freedom and couldn't stand injustice. Gambling was banned in the town across from Granby. This was undoubtedly a situation that conflicted with freedom. This minor incident triggered Marvin's first confrontation with the local government. After coming into conflict with the local government, Marvin spearheaded various campaigns. When the town's local newspaper published articles mocking Marvin's efforts, he had arguments with the newspaper's management. This incident was Marvin's first conflict, but it would not be his last. After arriving in Marvin Granby in 1992, he purchased a 2-acre plot of land at auction. However, Marvin was not the only bidder for this land. The Duchef family was also after this land, and this situation marked the beginning of the second conflict. This was because the Duchef family was both wealthy and one of the leading families in the region. After the auction, there were arguments between Cody Duchef and Marvin. But in the end, Marvin was an outsider who had come to town and had rightfully purchased the land at auction. Marvin set up his workshop and continued doing what he knew how to do. However, the land he had purchased had an infrastructure problem. There was no sewer connection. The previous owners of the land had found a temporary solution with a concrete mixer tank buried in the ground. But the municipality did not want this temporary solution and insisted that the infrastructure be built. In fact, both sides wanted the infrastructure to be built, but the problem was who would pay the $80,000 required for this. Marvin wanted the state to cover the cost of the sewer line, while the municipality said the expense belonged to the property owner. Even when the municipality came up with a more favorable offer, Marvin did not accept it. This situation continued for years, and Marvin's uncompromising stance in seeking justice caused a rift between him and Mayor Dick Thompson. In other words, since Marvin arrived, he had been in conflict with the wealthiest family in town and the mayor in that order. In short, was he a troubled man who came to town, or was he just a man seeking justice? By 1997, the Duchef family had decided to expand their operations in the area. They wanted to build a concrete factory in Granby. The proposed site was right next to Marvin's workshop. In the early 2000s, Marvin formally objected to the town council's zoning plan discussions. It was argued that the dust, noise, and heavy truck traffic generated by the factory would harm the environment. Furthermore, such a situation would also decrease the value of Marvin's adjacent land. Although Marvin and a large part of the townspeople initially opposed the project due to the environmental problems it would cause, the Duchef family managed to convince them by saying that dust and noise measures would be taken. Of course, it is not known whether this persuasion process only included dust and noise measures. As a result, Marvin was left alone again and had to fight on his own. Marvin subsequently filed a lawsuit in November 2000 to halt construction of the factory. While the lawsuit was ongoing, a public referendum was held in Granby in January 2001, resulting in only one vote against the project. I suppose you can guess who cast that single vote. The referendum result strengthened the municipality's decision, as the local community officially wanted this factory. Even though Marvin continued to complain after that, he received no positive response. Ultimately, the Duchef family was powerful, and the council and local newspapers were on their side. In April 2002, the lawsuit was decided against Marvin. Marvin was left alone during these proceedings. All doors were closed in his face and, in short, might made right. He was also discredited during this process. Even the people around him no longer engaged in friendly conversations with Marvin as they used to. It seemed like all the misfortunes were piling up. The tank Marvin used instead of a sewer had overflowed, and the factory construction had cut off Marvin's direct connection to the road. Now even Marvin had to take a long and winding route to reach his workshop. This situation not only made Marvin's work difficult, but also made it difficult for customers to come to the workshop. Marvin went to the city council with alternative solutions for the road problem and infrastructure services, but he was repeatedly rejected. In the voice recordings he left behind, Marvin said he felt excluded and silenced during this process. Marvin sold his repair shop and land to Mountain Park Concrete, owned by the Dochev family, for approximately $400,000 in 2003. But Marvin always viewed this decision as a necessity. He added a specific period to the sales agreement for his departure from the workshop. What appeared to be a defeat from the outside was actually the beginning of his plan for revenge. During this process, Marvin moved into his workshop and began living there. He brought the Komatsu D355A bulldozer he had purchased at auction in 2002 into his garage and began working on it. This was the birth of the beast that went down in history as the Killdozer, but which I believe should be called the Bulldozer. Marvin had served in the Air Force at one time and therefore understood bullet power. First, special armored plates were added around the bulldozer. These plates were made of approximately 0.6-inch reinforced steel. Subsequently, he created a sandwich-style armor consisting of 12 inches of concrete and another layer of the same armored plate. He completely covered the outside of the bulldozer with this armor plating. This was important to create an isolated environment for himself because there were many targets and he didn't want to be disturbed before finishing. Since the armor blocked his view, he installed 3 different cameras outside. To prevent damage to these cameras, he added bulletproof glass and a pressurized air cleaning system. Inside the cabin, he added monitors to view the images from the cameras. Even though the exterior was completely covered in armor, he could see the road with the help of this system. He also installed a ventilation system inside. He added an oxygen tank to protect against any gas exposure. He also placed 3 firing ports inside the cabin and installed various rifles. This preparation took exactly 18 months. The saddest part was that no one visited Marvin's isolated workshop during this process and noticed the situation. During this time, he recorded audio and sent the recordings to his brother. Marvin and his bulldozer were now ready. Rampage Day. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. On the afternoon of June 4, 2004, Marvin got into the bulldozer with his supplies and sealed himself inside with welding assistance. After all, he didn't want anyone to get inside, and he had no intention of coming out until he was done. Marvin started his bulldozer, broke through the door of his workshop to get out. His first target was clear and right next to him. He headed straight for the Mountain Park Concrete Factory and began demolishing the production buildings. At that moment, Cody DeChef, who was in the factory, first noticed the noise coming from afar, and then even received a radio announcement that there had been an explosion at the facility. Cody DeChef, who went to see what was happening, encountered the completely armored bulldozer. Of course, his first move was to fire the gun he pulled from his waist, but these bullets were not enough for the bulldozer. He then tried to climb onto the bulldozer, but there was no opening to reach the cab. His last move was to try to block the bulldozer's path with the factory's shovel, but this armored beast didn't care. The bulldozer weighed 80 tons and had at least 4 times the mass of the shovel. The bulldozer easily pushed the shovel aside and continued on its way. But Cody DeChef didn't give up. Marvin then shot the shovel's wheels with the weapons in his cabin, freeing himself from the shovel. Ultimately, there were many targets, and Marvin was just getting started. Meanwhile, the sheriff's deputy and patrol officers arrived at the scene. They also tried shooting at first, but were unsuccessful. After that, even though they tried to target the cameras, it was futile. The bullets did no damage. Meanwhile, Marvin, who had 3 different rifles, did not respond. He just kept moving toward his targets. With the concrete factory business done, Marvin and the bulldozer headed toward the center of Granby at only 5 miles per hour. The next target was, of course, the town hall. At this point, the town police were making announcements, evacuating people from surrounding buildings. Marvin probably wanted this anyway. Fed up with the controls, Marvin broke through the walls of the town hall and entered. Today, Marvin was powerful, and Marvin was right. Next up was the courthouse. After all, there was no need for a building for justice that didn't exist. The next target was the bank branch. The corner office was specifically targeted because that was the bank's zoning department, and it was where the factory zoning permit was issued. Meanwhile, the police, who had incredible timing, were looking for various ways in. The sheriff's deputy even climbed on top of the bulldozer, but found no opening. Later, they tried to throw smoke bombs from the exhaust, but Marvin was prepared for that too, keeping an oxygen tank inside the bulldozer. In addition, the ventilation system had been drained over time. The next target was the building of the local newspaper that had reported on him. After all, it was unreasonable to expect the newspaper, which believed that might makes right, to be angry with Marvin in this situation. Because today, Marvin was the powerful one. Next in line were the properties of several families located next to the Doshev family in the development zone. These were, of course, not ordinary people. The former mayor's house was also among the next targets. The police trying to stop Marvin were inadequate in this situation. As a result, the bulldozer, which had fired over 200 accurate shots, continued on its way without any trouble. The governor of Colorado at the time had begun discussions with the administration for more powerful firepower. Perhaps he wanted to use a helicopter or anti-tank missiles. But it was not an easy decision to make, as there could be civilian casualties in the center of town. Meanwhile, Marvin was moving toward his next target. This would be his final target, though he was unaware of it. The target was a hardware store owned by a town resident who had testified against him in court. As Marvin was happily demolishing the store, something unexpected happened. The hardware store's floor collapsed due to instability, and one of the bulldozer's tracks came off. No matter how much he maneuvered, Marvin couldn't get out of this situation. This giant machine, which destroyed everything in its path, was now immobilized. Meanwhile, SWAT teams had arrived at the scene and were calling for Marvin to surrender from outside. However, even though the bulldozer had stopped, there was no sound or sign of life coming from inside. Until that sound was heard, Marvin would not surrender to their justice once again. Marvin's journey had taken 2 hours, and he had visited only 13 of the 107 targets on his list. However, since the targets were ranked in order of importance, this was not a problem. He had eliminated the most important ones. Although he had caused millions of dollars in property damage, he had not harmed anyone. He had harmed no one but himself. Of course, there were negative reactions from the local community, but in the end, only the wheels of the shovel were shot at from the vehicle, which contained 3 different weapons. Marvin's attempts to reach the bulldozer cab continued, but even explosives proved ineffective. After 10 hours of work, the cover was cut open using a welding machine, and Marvin was reached. After the incident, the town of Granby branded Marvin a devil. However, the story spread beyond the town, and when the audio recordings were shared, Marvin was seen by the public as a man seeking justice, even a hero. People said he had taken justice into his own hands. The bulldozer was dubbed the Killdozer, but I think Bulldozer would be a more fitting name. While some labeled him a criminal and a terrorist, others saw him as a hero. In fact, the day of Marvin's action began to be celebrated. Do you think Marvin was a criminal? Or was he just a man seeking justice?